The Pittsburgh Steelers surely had what could be classified by their fan base and ultimately by the organization as well as a disappointing, yet not all that surprising 2013 season. You get off to the slow start, and then you find your way into the playoff race come week 17. You get hosed by a bad call in another game and ultimately lose a chance at the playoffs. But I don't think a lot of people going into the 2013 season had a lot of high hopes for the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is an organization that's kind of caught in that middle ground, in that mediocre territory, where they could go one or two directions. They could get things righted quickly and go right back into being a championship contending organization, or they can go in the opposite direction and they can become really bad in a big hurry. And part of the reason for that heading into the 2014 season is because of the Pittsburgh Steelers' recent draft history. The Steelers for many years have been known as an organization that drafted very well, that not only hit on the majority of their first round picks, but also did a good job of finding other pieces that fit on the offensive or defensive side of the football all throughout the draft. Well, that's just simply not the case over the past 3 years. The closest thing you have to a real surefire hit out of the draft in the past 3 years is their second round pick, Le'Veon Bell, at running back this past draft. That's really about it. The closest thing you get to a hit. You have some bad misses on third round picks like Sean Spence and Curtis Brown. And ultimately, for an organization for so many years that has done so well in the NFL draft, in particular with hitting on their first round picks, their recent draft history in round number one, not good. Lots of questions for this organization, in part because of the lack of development of their first round picks, whether it's Jarvis Jones, their first round pick this past draft, David DeCastro, their first rounder in 2012, Cameron Hayward, their first round pick in 2011, who both him and DeCastro played better, obviously, in this past 2013 season. They still got a long way to go to live up to that first round billing. You have other questionable picks in terms of a Mike Adams. Is he going to ever step up and become a big time left tackle at the National Football League level? A guy like Marcus Wheaton, their third round pick at wide receiver this past draft. Is he going to be a guy that could step into the shoes of an Emmanuel Sanders? Lots of questions in terms of the recent draft history for the Pittsburgh Steelers, which suggest that even rougher times could be potentially ahead if they don't do well here in this 2014 draft. Now, the Steelers are positioned relatively well. They've got a total of 9 picks. They've got picks in every single round, multiple picks in round 5 and round 6. So they have some ammunition to make some moves up the board if they need to get impact players, or they could sit tight and just stick to the old Steeler kind of philosophy of best available player regardless of position in this draft. In terms of their draft strategy, though, I think it's very simple on both sides of the ball. They need youth, they need speed, and they need athleticism at those skill positions. And what I mean by that, skill positions, both sides of the ball, I'm talking about wide receiver, I'm talking about tight end, I'm talking about running back, I'm talking about cornerback, and I'm talking about safety. Those are major deficiency areas for the Pittsburgh Steelers, in particular on the defensive side of the football with their secondary. Their secondary is old and bad without the young depth that you would need to step up and fill and take over the reins, if you will. There's a lot of problems here for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're a team that's gotten slow. They're a team that's gotten old in a very big hurry, in large part, again, due to their recent lack of success overall in the NFL draft. So looking at that strategy, like I said, they really need youth. They need speed. They need athleticism on both sides of the ball, in particular at the skill positions. In terms of team needs, I think the number one team need for this organization has to be the cornerback position. How long has it been since they've addressed corner in the first round? I think you have to go back maybe to the mid 90s or late 90s with Chad Scott, I believe was the last time they took a corner in the first round. They took Polamalu as a safety in the first round once, but that was in 2003. That was 11 years ago. This is a position that, by and large, it's been a weakness for years for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's just not been a huge point of emphasis for Dick LeBeau and that defensive scheme. You wonder why they've ignored it so much. With so many teams sitting there and going to more 3 and 4 wide receiver sets, multiple tight ends, stretching out defenses horizontally and then vertically, the Pittsburgh Steelers have stuck to that kind of formula of, well, we're going to be a defensive-minded team. We're going to be a team identified by their defense, and the linebackers are what are going to make the day for us. And that has worked for many years for the Pittsburgh Steelers. There's no doubt about it. And that still can work. But this total lack of emphasis and total de-emphasis on getting young, talented depth in that secondary over the years has really come back to bite the Pittsburgh Steelers in the ass as an organization in the big time way. And it's something that they must address. I could say that their number two need is safety. Look, pretty much all of their starters up in the secondary right now are 30 or older. That's not good. You can sit there and say, well, they signed a Mike Mitchell. Okay, and this was a guy that was a huge reach way back when in the second round when the Raiders took him. And how much longer is Polamalu going to be able to play at a high level? You still need help at safety, excuse me. You need young depth there. You need somebody that could potentially threaten for a starting spot sometime in 2014 or at least 2015 at the very earliest. Then you look at the offensive side of the ball, they have a big time need for a big physical number one type of wide receiver to go opposite Antonio Brown. You probably have a couple of years left of Big Ben, if that. You need to get everything you can out of him while you still can, while the getting is still good. As a result, you have to give him more weapons to work with. He needs a big physical number one target. He's lost Mike Wallace and Emmanuel Sanders the past couple of years, more of those smaller, quick twitch type of athletes. You still got Antonio Brown, who had a great 2013, but they need something more. They need a big physical Plaxburus type of presence in the wide receiving core. And I think they also need a young, more athletic tight end than what they get out of Heath Miller. That's not to say that Heath Miller isn't a good all-around NFL tight end, because he is, but he's not getting any older. He's had some injuries in the past, and the bottom line is with the importance of the tight end position in the NFL increasing every year and more teams going away from the great blocking tight ends and focusing more on those tight ends that can be dual threats, that could more importantly be weapons in the passing game where you can line them up all over the place and they create all types of mismatches. Heath Miller's just not that type of guy. And the Pittsburgh Steelers really as an offense lack that type of dynamic and that type really of option. Now, when you look at the Steelers in terms of the 15th overall selection, assuming they were to stay there, you could have a cornerback like Justin Gilbert be available. I think, frankly, if Justin Gilbert is anywhere close to them, if he gets to pick 11 to pick 12, the Steelers need to explore the possibility of moving up from 15, parting with that fourth-round pick to move up 2 or 3 slots to make sure they get that guy. Because not only would he be a starter at corner from day one, he would also bring a tremendous value and impact in the return game on special teams. If they don't go there, maybe they feel like they have to have Mike Evans and they got to make a big move up for him. Maybe they sit there and say, hey, we could trade back a little bit and still get a guy like a Kelvin Benjamin. They need, again, that big physical type of wide receiver. And there's not a ton of those guys in this draft. That's not the type of wide receiver draft that this is. This is about those versatile slot weapons that are 6 foot and under that can move. Well, the Steelers don't really need that. You could always say you could have one of those guys, yes, but they need that type of guy. So that might be the philosophy here in round 1. But again, this is overall a very deep wide receiver class, so maybe you can find that right guy a little bit later. Safety, you could sit there and say a guy like Dix or Pryor would make a lot of sense at 15 still, and I still think they would. Because again, how much longer is Polamalu going to be able to play? And how much are you really going to bank on Mike Mitchell being a big-time impact player for your defense in that secondary? The Pittsburgh Steelers have a lot of holes. There's no question. In particular, I think the holes come from their lack of talent at the skill positions on both sides of the football. If they can effectively address those glaring, gaping holes on their team in 2014 in this year's draft, now this is a Steelers team that could be right back in the mix in 2014 as a playoff contender and maybe be a championship contender in 2015 or 2016. If they don't, and they have another questionable draft like they've had the past few years, this is a Pittsburgh Steelers team that you could almost mark my words will be picking in the top 10 in the 2015 NFL draft, and then it might be time to start considering just completely starting over in Pittsburgh.